Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Juskewycz of Daily Fantasy Winners, and I'm bringing you another episode of Tee to Green. And this episode, I am going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do a mailbag episode. I'm going to take some questions that basically I've gotten from some people on the PGA Daily Fantasy Forum on DailyFantasyWinners.com, some Twitter questions, emails, some stuff I've seen online on just in generally speaking, talking about PGA DFS. And so going to take some of the most popular ones and hopefully answer them very well for you. And I think they're going to be some things that will really help you out as far as making your lineups here over the rest of the PGA DFS season. So before I do that, though, just in case, and this will be something that will certainly help you as we move forward here through the summer portion and into and all the way up into the FedEx Cup playoffs and the Ryder Cup, is I want to take actually look at where we're at in the PGA Tour season. And this is a very actually crucial and important time of where we're at in the PGA Tour season. Right now, it is about to get very hectic on the PGA Tour, and we are going to see a lot of great fields here every week. And so, so far throughout the year, we have a good week, and then we have a couple down weeks, and then another like a huge week, and then maybe another down week, and then a decent week, and it's pretty inconsistent. Right now, nearly every week is going to be great, or at least every other week is going to be great. And the schedule this summer is particularly hectic for a few reasons. Number one, the Olympics, that is the biggest factor. Some events had to be shifted around and things got a little bit more crammed together and shuffled around. And the second reason is this is a Ryder Cup year, and it's going to be a tournament where you're going to see a lot more players, and it's the Olympics too combined with that, but you're going to see some of the bigger players potentially playing in another event or two that they normally may not enter, so to speak, and you're just going to see a little bit of better depth here on a week-to-week basis, just combining all those factors in. Just taking a look at this really quickly. We got recording this on the Friday night of the Colonial Tournament, or the Dean DeLuca Invitational, as you can see. So next weekend is the Memorial Tournament. This is Jack's tournament over in Dublin, Ohio, Columbus area. This is one of the most popular PGA Tour events that's not a major or a WGC event. It will be a very strong field. The week after that is the St. Jude Classic over in Memphis, Tennessee. This is usually kind of a little bit of a weaker field. It is the tournament, if you remember, that one of two things will happen. Two things it's usually known for. One is there are tons of balls in the water, and there are sometimes some WDs before the U.S. Open, because this is when the tournament usually is, and sometimes if things don't go well, people kind of say, all right, I'm out of here to go prepare for the U.S. Open. Unfortunately, that happens there quite often. But anyways, that tournament will be a little bit weaker. Then we have the U.S. Open, which is obviously going to be a huge field. Then we have the Quicken Loans National, which is at Congressional. Congressional is one of the best courses on tour. A lot of pros love it. They love playing in this golf tournament. This tournament is usually a little bit later in the summer. It has been moved up because of the Olympics. So this is a pretty big tournament, non-major, non-WGC event, but it is still going to be a very good field, I assume. The next week, skip this first tournament here because on the same week, and it's for usually the weaker players that do not get into the WGC Bridgestone Invitational, which is also usually played later on in the summer. And this tournament has been moved up again because of the Olympics. So another big tournament right there. And then we have the Greenbrier. The Greenbrier is actually usually, it's normally not the week before the British Open. The John Deere Classic is usually the week before the British Open. And the reason why it got shuffled around here a little bit is because of the Olympics, and the John Deere is being played at the same time as the Olympics this year, because the John Deere usually has one of the weakest fields of the year due to the fact that it's usually the week before the British Open. And so, in any case, in TBC Deere Run, I have played it. It's a great course. I love playing it, but in PGA Tour standards, it's just not at the top of the list. So let's put it simply that way. So the Greenbrier usually is a pretty decent field. Maybe we'll take a little bit of a hit this year because it is the week, of course, before the British. But we'll see how that works. That's usually still a decent field. Then, of course, we do have the Open Championship, aka the British Open. If you didn't know that, Open Championship, British Open, same thing. Week after that, RBC Canadian Open, usually a little bit of a step back there. That's usually one of the weaker tournaments. But then right after that is the PGA Championship. The PGA Championship is usually a month, 4 weeks after the British Open. It is only 2 weeks after because, of course, again, the Olympics. So crazy stuff happening here. Then the Travelers Championship in Connecticut. This is actually usually a pretty decent field as well. It's kind of on the same levels. Well, probably a slight step down from Congressional, but still a pretty decent field usually each year. But that might take a slight step back because the Olympics is the following week. And so in any case, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because these are decent tournaments. They usually get strong fields, but just what the schedule is. a lot of these top players are going to be trying to play in these tournaments because right after the Olympics here this week, August 11th, 14th, we have the Wyndham, and that's the final tournament you can play in order to get into the FedEx Cup playoffs. And then it's also one of the final tournaments you can play in to make the Ryder Cup team and get into the top 8. So, there'd be a lot of players trying to play in those tournaments there over the last couple of weeks anyways, regardless of how busy the schedule is. And then, of course, the final 4 weeks leading up to the Ryder Cup, we have the Barclays, Deutsche Bank Championship, BMW Championship, and the Tour Championship. So, very busy summer. And why do I bring all this up? The reasoning on this is because I want to take a look at recent performance. Now, recent performance, or recent form, if you will, is usually a very important factor when we're looking at making our DFS picks or DFS lineups. Now, I think it's going to be an even more important factor, and arguably the most important factor here when you're looking at making your lineups here in the future. And the reason why is because of the very busy schedule, usually earlier on in the year in particular, but even like generally speaking, on a common year where there isn't an Olympics going on, usually the summer months and the fall months do get busier and they burn out a little bit. But since it's so bad this year, players are not going to get much time to practice very much, and they're going to want to take whatever time they've got in order to rest. Basically, that's not to say they're not going to hit range balls and all that kind of stuff and play practice rounds, but it's going to be reduced in my opinion for the players because this is as hectic of a summer as there has ever been for probably most of these guys. At least on the PGA Tour speaking. And it just earlier in the year, obviously it's a lot more time for people to take some time off, and this is why SBK 216 happened. This is why a lot of other players, will take some time off, spend with their families. In the winter months, it's also hard to tell with recent performance just because when you're coming out of not playing golf at all really much in December, as far as the tournaments are concerned, it's a little bit tougher to tell in the winter months just because you're not playing as frequently and the tournaments just aren't as big, generally speaking, on a week-to-week basis. So it's a little bit tougher to tell, but now in the summer, we're going to get a real good idea of who's playing well. So if you see somebody that you think should be playing better and he's not playing that well this summer, maybe for a month stretch in there, yes, there can be something to look at as far as the there's something to look at as far as the course fit goes in terms of what players will match up at a certain course. Yeah, there might be something there. But for the most part, generally speaking, I don't think, someone will be able to turn it around as easily this summer as opposed to maybe he would have been able to do the last couple months, basically. Hopefully that made sense. All right, so I'm going to take some of the questions. I got 5 questions here I'm going to answer. One of the most popular ones I'm getting, and I'm seeing also as well, is what is wrong with Jordan Spieth? And this, to me, just comes along the lines of absurd expectations. But I will answer this in a few different ways. First of all, earlier in the year, the reasoning is he played too many tournaments, in my opinion. And more importantly, he played in too many tournaments all over the place. He started out the year by saying January, not the season, back in the fall. He started in January by playing in the Hyundai Tournament Champions, as he should. Kapalua is gorgeous. Been there. It is. Honestly, go to Kapalua. You should. It's a gorgeous place, amazing golf. Definitely recommend it. But anyways, that's where he started out, dominated there. But then he went on this basically international stint where he played Abu Dhabi, played in Singapore. I think he played somewhere else, and then he's back in California and he's going in and out basically. And that is a very time-demanding thing to do and very mentally draining when you're going out of these different time zones. But, at Jordan's age and, when you can market yourself and get cash grabs and go play in international events, you go do it. I do not blame him whatsoever. But that is basically the reason why the consistency of Jordan was pretty bad there, I think, for the first couple of months. Now, obviously, he played extremely well at the Masters, and he was dominating for 60-some holes, I think it would have been. And then he quadruple bogeyed, of course, the 12th at Augusta, and so that cost him the tournament. But so basically, he played 71 holes at Augusta fairly, because the conditions were much tougher this year as opposed to last year. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of the quality golf he played, in terms of how great his putting was, Jordan played pretty much identical rounds at Augusta from last year to this year. It's just one hole basically made the difference because he was dominating both tournaments. And so, anyways, when you look at the statistics, I'll take a step back here now. If you take a look at his statistics, yes, he is clearly not doing as well this year as opposed to to last year. Having said that, he has still played pretty darn well. He has several top 10s and top 20s. He has only missed 2 cuts this year. He missed 4 all of last year, but he had missed 2 up to this point last year as well. He missed the Players' Championship cut both years, and that is a terrible course fit for him, being more of a ball striker's golf course. And he missed the Farmers Insurance Open cut last year, and he missed the Northern Trust Open this year. 2 tournaments that usually have fairly tough fields, and there are actually some tournaments also that the top players are more vulnerable to missing the cut due to them just being tougher courses. And so and just kind of the conditions of the way it plays out and just where the golf courses are laid out. So anyways, Jordan, right now between this year and last year, statistically, he is not doing as well. And yes, he is not playing as well as he was last year. But at the same time, he's still playing pretty darn well. And I think it's kind of more along the absurd expectations line. And I'm recording this on a Friday night, and you might see this on Monday, and he just won Colonial, and this is a moot point maybe in some people's minds. So keep that in mind as well. I will say this, though, in context, just to continue on with this. With the way Jordan Spieth's game is right now, I'm not sure we're going to see a season like Jordan's last year for at least the next few years if he doesn't change something. And the reason why I say that is his driving accuracy has never really been a strength. He's always kind of been middle of the road here, at least over the last few years. And he's young, don't get me wrong, so it's not like we're going off a huge history here, but his driving accuracy has never been a strength. And he misses right quite often, which is honestly, it's better to miss on one side of the fairway or miss into one side of the hole consistently, because you at least know where your common misses and you can plan for it. But nevertheless, his driving accuracy has never been that big of a strength. And he's not a long ball hitter. He's kind of middle of the road in that department as well. And so when you don't have middle of the road accuracy and you have middle of the road driving distance, you are just putting a lot more pressure on your iron and wedge play with your approaches, the scrambling, and then of course as well as the putting. Now obviously he has one of the best short games on tour, and arguably very early, but still, it's hard to see the short game going away, and so I'm sure he'll have one of the best short games that we ever talk about in years to come. But it's very tough with putting being the biggest area when it comes to variance. Putting has the most variance of any area in golf. That it's just difficult to be consistently at the top on a week-to-week basis when you're just relying on that much when your driver is off or your tee game isn't as strong. It's just hard to be that consistently good with this style. Now he is very young, and he'd be a senior at Texas this year, so let's keep that in mind if he had stayed in school. So obviously I will say this, he is definitely very likely to continue to be one of the best players on the PGA Tour, regardless if he changes anything, because he's clearly showing he's one of the best PGA Tour players right now, and he's not even playing that great from a statistical standpoint. So I really I don't think he's going to fall off that much really at this point, because his short game is that good that his floor is still going to be very high. However, I don't think Jordan right now has the ceiling of a Jason Day or a Rory McIlroy because of the ball striking issues he has in terms of he doesn't have a length advantage and he doesn't really have the accuracy advantage. And so, obviously this can definitely change, but he can definitely improve in these areas. And so I'm not saying this is going to stick around for a while. But right now, if he doesn't change something, I just don't think he's going to hit a Tiger Woods level, or maybe even just have the ceiling potential of what Jason Day and Rory McIlroy. And I do think Jason Day is on his way to do some very crazy things. I know for those of you who remember my stuff last year, I recommended Jason Day through the roof, starting, I think it was around May, beginning of June, basically. And that paid off pretty well for a lot of the people that stuck with him there. So I think Jason's on his way to great stuff. But Jordan can be too. But I think Jordan's going to have to definitely improve that ball striking, and that driver is going to have to get better if he wants to get to that level. But nevertheless, still a great player. Okay, that was a long-winded answer for that one. Let's see if this one will be a little more efficient. Second one. I can't figure out which is better between greens and regulation percentage and proximity to the hole. I hear different opinions from people, and I feel like it should be straightforward. Which is better? So which is better between greens and reg percentage and proximity to the hole? So first of all, I'll say DFS golf is in an interesting place compared to other sports because it is an individual sport with just so many different statistics, yet the sport has so many variables within itself that there's just no common formula that someone really follows to be like like the best or the expert at PGA DFS golf. Yes, there are definitely people that are better than others, but and even the best people, they are using different formulas each week, whether it's like your models or just different approaches and things like that. So this is why you are hearing a lot of different approaches just from a lot of different people. So that's why, honestly, I think ultimately DFS golf is one of the best DFS sports, just because there are so many different approaches and it's being such a heavily discussed, and it's a popular event right now. So, but to answer this question specifically, I like proximity to the hole significantly more, and green and rake percentage can be very misleading. I'll answer this in a couple ways. So, like most average golfers, when they're playing like their municipal courses or like country clubs, they're going to play on greens that are relatively small, and we're like the maximum distance putt you're going to have is like 35 feet or something at the worst. The average green size that the pros play on are significantly bigger. So furthermore, like also like every pin that these pros are like playing on, every tournament every round these pros are playing in, the pin locations are always going to be like tucked in a corner or like on a certain side of the green. And they're going to be in like the most difficult spots most of the time. So let's like take for example, like I'll just give a very basic example. So like let's say you're on another 80-yard par 3 with a back pin at your local course. You may be so like you're hitting like a 5 or a 6 iron or something like that. And you may say you mishit it and you're going to be like 5 yards short of the green. Clearly not a green regulation. But like on a pro course, if you hit that shot and you have a bigger green, the ball will catch on the green and you hit a green regulation. Whereas even though you're playing a much tougher golf course, the green's most likely going to be bigger, even though it's the same distance shot. And so on on that golf course, you're getting green and reg, whereas your local course, you're not getting green regulation. So that's why that would be like one example. Another example would be like, let's say like a pro like has an approach shot to a pin that's located on the right side of the green, okay? And let's say the slope of the green runs left to right as well, kind of where the pin is located. Let's say a pro hits a shot just pretty much right at the hole or just to the right of the hole. He could be, maybe that ball hits on the green and then it trickles down the slope a tiny bit below the hole and he ends up on the fringe or like the edge of the fairway or something on the near the green, and he has like a 10, 12 footer up the hill and it's in perfect place, obviously, because you want to be below the hole and you're pin high and everything like that, but it's not a green regulation, which is perfect, which is still really good placement. Whereas you might hit a shot that is 10 feet to the left of the hole, or 10, 15 feet left of the hole, which is about the same distance away. But if it's not quite pin high and maybe it's on the above the hole or something like that, you may have a really tricky downhill left to right footer. That shot is obviously much worse than compared to the one that's on the fringe or maybe on the edge of the fairway, even though you're getting the green in regulation there. So these are just a couple examples on why I do not like greens in regulation percentage. Also, another reason why is that the golf courses that pros play are much different on a week-to-week basis. Some greens are much smaller than others, and some are significantly bigger. Really varies from course to course, but generally speaking, the pro greens are significantly bigger. This is why I say proximity to the hole is much better than greens in regulation. It just simply shows better approach shots, which is what you want. This brings me to another point that I'm going to talk about actually to answer this as well. Another popular metric is proximity to the hole from a specific distance. If you go onto PGAtour.com, you will see a lot of statistics that are like approaches from like 100 to 125 yards, 175 to 200, a lot of like 25-yard ranges. And yes, they do 50-yard ranges and things like that, and they have all kinds of ranges to show these rankings. Some people doing statistics and these metrics out there with PGA Daily Fantasy like to sometimes focus on specific distances because they will see that like, oh, last year this tournament showed this many shots in this range, or it will show that, oh, there's like this many holes at this distance, so they're going to hit like this, shots from this distance. So you have to be extremely careful with this, and I don't like this a lot. I don't like this very much, I should say. I really kind of would avoid using the specific ranges, and there's a reason why. Shots within a certain distance, regardless of how small the range is, it is not the same shot, every time. There are so many different things that factor into a golf shot, whether what the wind's doing, is it uphill, is it downhill, is the ball above your feet, is the ball below your feet, what is the pin location, what's your intended ball flight, your club selection changes, and what kind of swing you're making, just all these different kinds of things. And these are all different things that can play into a role of how far a shot is. So that's one thing out of the gate. The second thing also is when you factor all these things and combine it with how small the sample size is. We are not looking at that many golf shots, even though we're right now sitting here at the end of May. And so we're well into the PGA Tour season, and yet when you look in these like 25-yard ranges, oftentimes most of the shots you'll see total shots in that range is only 20 shots in this range, like 30 shots in this range. Like it's not that many for a sample size. So that just data won't have a lot of relevancy. It's just very difficult to figure out. And also, this last point I'll make also for this is it's very difficult to figure out what exact approach distances will be for each tournament, even if you have data to go off of like a past year or past couple seasons. And the reason why is the weather, the tee boxes, the conditions just change every year. And there can be there can be remodels done and things like that. And players just won't hit the same club off of every tee also. Even if they do on 1 year, they could change it up the next year. They change game plans all the time based on whatever swing changes they're making, and equipment change, just things like that, or how well they're hitting certain clubs at a certain time. It's just never consistent. So this is why I always say general proximity to the hole is good, because it shows how someone's ball striking has been. The general proximity to the hole. This is why I always think that is the best one to go with, and you should be using it every single week. And yes, some weeks are more important than others, but it's generally a good thing to use every single week. I will add just one thing to the specific ranges where you can use it. If let's see, somebody has a good specific proximity to the hole, but it's from a wider range, you could use that. Like, for example, if there's a long par 70 course, let's say, where there's several par 4s that are 500 yards or close to it, and someone has good proximity to the hole from 150 to 250 or 150 to 225, maybe 250, maybe 150 to 225 for a shorter hitter, because he's not going to be able to crank at 300. You just want to use that one or over 300, and you want to use that 150 to 225 range, so to speak, then you can go for that if they have good rankings in all those areas, roughly, so to speak, because then they're okay, they're a good mid-iron play, they're a good longer iron play, or they're good hitting their hybrids right now, or their utility clubs, or whatever they're hitting. And so sometimes you can use that to your advantage. But to be fair, though, at the same time, if they've got a good enough proximity to the hole from all those different distances, they very likely have a good general proximity to the hole, unless they have the worst wedge game on tour. So you might be able to find a little discrepancy there, but you're finding something pretty darn specific. So for all intents and purposes, I would just focus on general proximity to the hole, and I think that's best for all the reasons I just listed. So anyways, moving on to the next one. Ownership percentage, yes. How do you figure out who will have high ownership? It seems pretty random to me each week. I will first start off by saying, and I'll be the first to admit, that my ownership predictions, which are usually generally pretty good, but lately they have not been as good, and I will be the first to admit that. So if that's part of the reason why you're asking this, I will just say that, yes, some of them have been good, but yes, some of them have been off, and I've been, some of them it makes sense, and then some of them my jaw just drops Thursday morning. So trying to get a little bit better at that. But I'll start off by saying first of all, it depends on the field strength and how many players are priced at a certain point. That will play a huge role into it. Especially when there aren't that many golfers priced around $8,000, and the average price average price golfer per player at the beginning is $8,333, and there's not that many players around there. There's going to be a lot of high ownership guys around that area, just because there aren't that many options, and you kind of need to fill that spot, because most people aren't going to do three $10,000 level golfers and three $6K golfers, basically, or whatever would come out to be. Yeah, that's right. I think that's correct math. Anyways. There's little things like that you can pay attention to, but in a general sense, here is how I would rank the important factors for ownership percentages. There are 5 things. The first is recent performance. Recent performance will always trump everything. Recent performance is the thing. Recent performance in other sports is generally what the public, the fish, whatever you want to call them, the average players, common players, that is the general thing that some people always look to when they're making lineups, is they want to see good recent performance, because they always think they're going to be playing better. In most sports, you can take advantage of that, because that's generally not a good thing to do. In golf, though, of course, recent performance has been statistically shown that it does matter. So this is why pros and the public players as well will both be using a lot of times the players who are playing very well as of late. And so that's usually the first thing you look at. The second thing you look at is, are they a star player? The star players, even though when they're in a little bit of a slump, they are generally usually rostered fairly highly, whether it's Jordan Spieth, Phil Mickelson, maybe not quite as much these days, but Phil's still rostered a decent amount. In kind of the weaker fields. I mean, again, it depends on the field strength too, because obviously a star player in a weaker field is going to be rostered significantly more than a star player in a major, regardless, how well someone is playing usually. So stars is usually a good thing to look at. Third thing is course history. A lot of people like using course history. I do not like using course history as much, or if I do, I would like to use some other courses that are comparable to it so I have a better sample to look at, because sometimes I think course history can be misleading off a small sample size, especially when you're looking at different seasons. But course history, just as far as the ownership goes, a lot of people do like looking at that. The fourth thing are longer hitters, or people that can really rack up the eagles and have eagle opportunities. That's for upside. And, so longer hitters, generally speaking, will usually have a little bit more upside. Like Dustin Johnson's usually rostered fairly highly. In most tournaments, not all tournaments, it depends on some other factors, because Dustin usually is playing well and he's a longer hitter and they know his upside. So anyways, Dustin would be like kind of an example of that. And then the fifth thing is, who are people recommending on DFS sites and podcasts? There are a lot of different people recommending players out there, and a lot of people these days like listening to other people to see what they like and what their reasoning is, and they naturally become more popular. But that is the fifth reason. When this is a perfect segue actually into the fourth question. Why do you release your preview video so late? Most places seem to have everything up by Tuesday morning. Okay, so I do this because of that fifth reason I just said. I do this because I want to hear who others like for the ownership reason. I generally go to like some different sites and like even listen to like a few different other podcasts. And like while you can use the other things I ranked for ownership predictions, any information that you can get is beneficial. And so while I definitely, and first of all, let me say is like, while I definitely encourage you to watch my videos each week in the previews, and I think they'll help you out, I encourage you to listen to the other podcasts as well, because there are some really good podcasts out there for PGA DFS, and they give out some great information. They're fun, humorous too as well, but they really do give out some great information, and I think you guys would like them. So in any case, though, the other reason why I also take a little bit longer is that I actually really like going through each player and see if I want to consider them for my picks. And also, I'm doing this all on my own. Most people have at least one other person or like a group of people working together on all this kind of stuff, and they want to get their information out first and as early as possible, which is like Monday night, Tuesday morning. Which is perfectly understandable, since like I know they're doing plenty of research beforehand, and they want to get their information out first, so people will listen to them first because people are craving information. But with the salaries coming out Monday night, and I would just much rather do a thorough job and take. I do stuff before Tuesday as well, but like I would much rather take more time, consider the salaries a little bit more, because the salaries can play a huge role into the ownership factor as well. And ownership in GPPs is where I still think is the best way to make money in daily fantasy golf. And so so when you combine all that, and plus the tournaments don't start until Thursday morning as well. I'll throw that out there as well. The video is always up by Wednesday morning or Wednesday late morning at the absolute latest. I usually like to do Tuesday night. I don't actually, I obviously shoot the videos here, like, on my webcam, but I'm not the one putting it up on YouTube and assembling like kind of the graphics and stuff to go with it before and after. So there's a little bit of like time in between there too as well. So in any case though, but it's like usually the videos are up Tuesday night or Wednesday morning at the latest, and that's still perfectly, that's plenty enough time to make your lineups, of course, before Thursday morning, especially when you got to look at weather Wednesday night, of course, as well, to look for a potential advantage with tee times. Okay, so the last thing, and then we'll wrap this up, is am I going to be doing previews for European Tour events, because the BMW Championship DraftKings decided to do contests for that. So as of right now, I do not plan on doing it. As of right now, I spend a pretty good amount of time each week preparing for each PGA event, and my time is really limited as it is with the other daily fantasy sports stuff going on that I help with contributing, and then as well as some other work-related things as well. So my time is really limited. Having said that, this could change in the future. I'm always open to answering your questions about the European Tour events, on the PGA Forum or on Twitter. hope maybe this will change down the road if it becomes more popular and my time frees up a little bit and everything like that. If you do end up deciding that you just really want to play these European Tour events and you think that there's money to be made here because this is a new thing and you want to jump in on it, my advice on that is really research the golf courses as opposed to the golf players. Yes, the field strength in European Tour events are generally not as good, and the top players are still pretty good, and most people know them, but the depths, you don't really know some of those names over there. So a lot of people think, oh, let's research the players and let's look at recent performance. But the thing is, that's what pretty much most people are doing. It's very basic stuff. And golf course fit is such a big factor. I would really look with European Tour events whenever they happen. I would be researching golf courses and then seeing which golfers fit those types of golf courses. Now that is of course harder when you don't know as much about the players, but again, you can look, you can do through just some research on each player as far as like, is this person a longer hitter? How good is their driving accuracy? You can define some basic statistics that are available on EuropeanTour.com, and sometimes these European Tour players also play on the PGA Tour, and they will have PGA Tour stats as well, and you can kind of combine the two together a little bit. But you'll just kind of get a feeling off of like which types of players somebody is, and you can use all the other factors we talk about daily fantasy and making good lineups. And I would really just target the good course fits. Again, like I said, in the golf course research. And then the last thing I would also say, if you're going to do it, I would fade some of the bigger names and the most popular players as far as the European Tour events go. Over there, because most people are going to feel more comfortable with making their European Tour lineups with players that they know. So I would try and fade some of those popular, most common names over there. So yeah, should be able to get an edge on that, hopefully just on that alone. And that is it for this episode. I will try and do some more strategy videos here in the future, do these kinds of maybe mailbag episodes, because that seems to be the most positive feedback I get, even more as opposed to the preview ones, unless there's really good picks out there, of course, for the previews as well. But so I'll try and do some more of these in the future. We'll definitely have some more extensive videos leading up to the U.S. Open before Oakmont. I have actually a pretty good strategy saved up for that tournament, which I don't think a lot of people are going to use. We will see about that, because I've already started seeing some people talk about the U.S. Open a little bit as far as what they're going to do for that here in a couple of weeks, and I think it may not be the best move. But we'll get into that more later when that event comes up. But as for right now, we got the Memorial next week. Should be fun. Hopefully your lineups are doing well as far as the Colonial is concerned. And of course, as always, if you like this video and any of the other stuff we do, please like and subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels with Daily Fantasy Winners. Then, of course, you can follow me at Nick Juskewycz and Daily Fantasy Winners at DFantasyWinners. Thanks, everyone.